Director!
What?
Wake up. You still have to finish your Halloween episode.
Ugh, don't remind me.
Hey, you're the one who said remind you or you'd miss your deadline again. I'm just doing what you asked.
Come on, I didn't even get to do the one I wanted to do. I don't even have an idea in my brain right now.
Ah, yes, you complain about that every year. Oh, I don't get to do the projects I want to. Well, maybe lower your scope because you're still in the middle of the Midwest. Just lie there for a moment and figure something out. There's got to be at least one idea in your head somewhere.
You want me to pull something out of my ass?
Why not? We didn't stop you with the Master of Disguise video.
I have a question for you.
I might have an answer.
What do you suppose is the lowest form of comedy?
Literally your entire show. Why do you ask?
Well, I say that because... I Hate Everything did a video a while back. He talked about... Do you remember those movies that came out years ago?
Movies? You're speaking nonsense to me.
It was like a date movie, disaster movie, epic movie.
I guess one of those low-budget parody films. You think you might want to talk about one of those?
Well, that's the thing. I could have sworn I remember those movies coming out, but I think I've only ever seen one of them.
Which one did you see?
I'm not sure, but I significantly remember it being... I remember that it was so bad that it made me never want to watch another one of those again.
And which one was that?
Scary Movie 5 is, quite possibly, the worst satire film I have ever seen. But defining why that is a lot more complex than just movie bad. There are a lot of things going on here, but to explain that, I have to go in depth. Let's just take a moment to explain the story real quick, because frankly, it's not that important to this discussion. Also, if my voice sounds a little weird, I had to re-record this audio, and I have a cold, so get over it. So Charlie Sheen and Lindsay Lohan are doing it in the first scene, and then Lohan gets possessed Paranormal Activity style and kills Charlie Sheen. All this scene really does is remind me that Lindsay Lohan's voice sounds like she has a diet of 20 cigars a day.
Why do you need security cameras pointing at your bed?
I just ate a mosquito.
His 3 daughters are left in the cabin in the woods, and they're found by Snoop Dogg and whoever the hell this is. Then our main character and her boyfriend, husband, it's not really implied what they are. They adopt the 3 girls and move into a house filled with a bunch of cameras so we can reference Paranormal Activity a whole bunch of times. Then they start trying to work out why the children are acting so weird between scenes of the guy working at a lab where he works with apes a la Planet of the Apes, and the woman rehearsing for Swan Lake, alluding to the movie Black Swan. The two discover an entity known as Mama, who was corrupted by the evil dad's Necronomicon, who wants to sacrifice herself and the children by throwing themselves off a cliff. The movie never explains why she wants to do this, but if the movie's gonna overlook it, so am I. Anyways, they stop her from sacrificing the children, then drop her off the cliff. She falls into a hot tub full of sharks. Then the recital happens at the end where the understudy takes the main role, and then the movie ends, but not before revealing that the Morgan Freeman narrator that's been appearing all throughout the movie was the ape all along. Sounds pretty stupid, I know, but the story is just a backdrop for the film's main focuses, which is where the main discussion comes into play. So first, let's talk about this movie's approach to comedy. Now, many people will try to tell you, in defense of their enjoyment of a comedy that may not be that great, that comedy is subjective. And to that I say, no it isn't. Comedy isn't subjective at all. Now, what makes you laugh personally is a completely different story. I mean, you can say that a fart did indeed make you laugh, but you can't say that it's great comedy. You could easily sit there and say that Master of Disguise is one of the greatest comedies of all time because you, personally, laughed your ass off at it. You absolutely have the right to say that because you know what you enjoy. But that doesn't mean just because someone like me enjoys The Room, that doesn't immediately make it a masterpiece. Even though it very much is. That being said though, I find it hard for anyone to find the comedy in this movie to be funny. If there is a joke with some potential, it keeps getting run into the ground. See, this movie has 3 different types of jokes that they like to go with. The first type is shock value. This term kind of gets thrown around a lot without proper knowledge of how it's actually supposed to work, but basically, shock value is when a writer will write a very specific set of gags that are not designed to make someone laugh, but rather designed to make the viewer disgusted disgusted. There's a lot of jokes in here about people being disgusting, unhygienic, going to the bathroom, apes throwing and that's all the joke is. It's just disgusting for the sake of being disgusting. If you're going to incorporate this kind of humor, the best way you can do it, if it is necessary, is to write it as a character trait and not a throwaway gag.
You're the one out of all of us who doesn't shower!
Or wash their clothes. I was getting around to it.
This year, right?
But that doesn't happen. It's just shock value for the sake of being shocking. And it's about as shallow as it sounds. The second type of joke is the blight upon humanity, or as the rest of us who aren't overprotective parents would call it, suggestive humor. Now let me be very clear here. I love this type of comedy. If it's implemented correctly, playing to that more sultry side of the audience's brain can have a very positive reception.
And I see your Schwartz is as big as mine.
But the thing is, much like the shock value humor, the joke has to be more than just haha the man said the funny sounding sex word.
My name is Penis!
So I'll give you 3 guesses where this movie takes that kind of humor.
Dan, what is that?
My penis.
But don't you worry, because this is not the main focus the movie is going for. Which brings me to the ultimate reason I wanted to talk about this movie. The third type of joke this movie goes for. The answer to my opening question, what is the lowest form of comedy? And the answer is quite simple. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Director, I don't think I know what kind of comedy you're talking about. But in actuality, everyone has seen this comedy in action at least once. Have you ever seen a movie or a TV show that makes references to other movies or TV shows or pop culture icons? That's referential humor. In subtle ways, referential humor works more especially if it involves some type of commentary on what it's referencing. Granted, it's not very subtle half the time, but it does work.
Merchandising, merchandising! Where the real money from the movie is made.
But what happens when you take the joke out of the reference? Well, that's all you're left with, a reference. And the problem is, a lot of people will think that a reference alone counts as a joke. And unfortunately, to the average movie-going public, they're right. Hey, I recognize that thing that they're referencing. That means this movie is funny. Because who needs a joke when you got references? Well, I'm here to tell you the one thing that I'm sure everybody knew I was gonna say to begin with. A reference alone does not count as a joke. You have to provide something based off of what you're referencing. If you're making some sort of statement about the reference, the statement has to be the focus of the joke, not the reference itself. Young Frankenstein is a parody of the classic monster film Frankenstein. But the joke isn't that it's parodying Frankenstein. The humor comes from exaggerations of the same events, but with a slapstick realism applied on top. Between Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, and of course it wouldn't be right to mention Mel Brooks without mentioning Spaceballs, the humor is in the satire, not the reference. But as the title of Scary Movie implies, these films are supposed to act as satires and parodies to the genres of films they're based off of, right? Date movie, epic movie, disaster movie. It's clearly the spirit of satire lifted from the works of Mel Brooks or even Leslie Nielsen to some extent. But even though they're both doing the same type of film, how come one is clearly working more than the other? Well, for one of them actually understands what the f they're satiring. One thing that is particularly interesting about these movies, especially with Scary Movie 5, is that some of these films weren't even out yet. Mama was released in 2013, the year Scary Movie 5 released, but filming started in 2012 before the film is even out. And some of these movies, which had been anywhere from a few months to a couple of years old, aren't even being referenced to their fullest potential. And that's because I'm convinced that the writers only saw the trailers for these films and not the actual films themselves. Take this joke from earlier that I mentioned.
And that reminds me of a horror movie I once saw.
What horror movie?
The one with the cabin in the woods.
Friday the 13th?
No, the one with the cabin in the woods.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
No, the one with the cabin in the woods.
Okay, the movie is implying that the reference is Cabin in the Woods and that the actual cabin is the threat, because the trailer builds up the suspense about how dangerous this cabin is supposed to be. However, if you've seen Cabin in the Woods, you'll know that the actual film is way off of the trailer's implication. I'm not gonna say what it actually is, all I can say is go watch Cabin in the Woods. It's marketing genius at its fullest potential, but the short answer is, it's not what you think it is. And here we have identified major problem number 1. The references aren't even close to what they're referencing. The big thing you have to keep in mind when making references like this is that you have to know what you're satiring. I mean, look at me. I've been trying to imply that this show is a satire of the angry critic genre of film reviews. Subtly, probably not perfectly, but it's because I understand the medium and there are criticisms I have about the genre, hence the whole sub-character thing. But if I didn't know what I was making a commentary about, I wouldn't be able to land one single joke about it.
Not to imply you have the ability to land a joke to begin with.
It's important that you understand what you're referencing and what statement you're making about it. Because guess what? If you make a joke about something you don't understand, and then everyone who does understand what you're trying to joke about hears your joke, everyone who gets it will know that you fell on your goddamn face.
Normal words, but a horse guy.
Oh, and get this, for a film called Scary Movie, most of the referenced films aren't even horror films. Am I just mistaken? Are the films Ted, Planet of the Apes, Black Swan, Inception, 50 Shades of Grey, Medea? Are all of these supposed to be horror films? Well, one of them is, but we don't count that. The only reason they're being referenced is because they were popular at the time. Hell, a couple of the lines I've used in this review are actually references to other film YouTubers.
Who needs a joke when you've got reference?
Most of my audience, though, isn't going to get those references off the bat because they're not familiar with the material. Do you see the problem now? And then there's the references to political events or controversial events that do nothing but date the movie. Remember how Lindsay Lohan was getting arrested over and over again? Remember when Tiger Woods had an affair? And again, you can make this type of referential humor work, but it involves a bit of tact. You can't just reference politics out of nowhere and just expect it to work. The best way to incorporate that is to just make the comedy bounce off of the politics, but that's a subject for another day. But there's only one reason why this movie was made. The same reason all the other ones were made. It has nothing to do with satire or parody. The film isn't trying to make some kind of statement. It's made for one single reason. All of these references are current to the film's release, popular, and marketable. The trailers were designed to draw in people familiar with the source material. Did you guys know that the Evil Dead references aren't meant for the original films, but are meant for the remake that was released 1 week prior to this film? This movie doesn't have a message about it. It doesn't have a clever satire. There's no charm to its comedy. It's just a dumb parody film filled with member berries for the audience to gargle down like salt water.
Remember, stormtroopers?
There's nothing special about it. There's nothing clever to say, nothing interesting to communicate. It's just trying to take advantage of a crowd of people who don't know any better and shove a whole bunch of references and sex jokes down their throat just because they want money. It's manipulating and abusing the trust of the audience. And what else would you expect from a film distributed by the Weinstein Company? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you make a reference funny!
And there we go. Hopefully that should satisfy the Halloween audience, yeah?
So long as you don't drop the ball for another 3 months, yes. Wait, hang on a second.
Wait, what?
I think we forgot something.
No, I think I covered everything. I think that's it.
No, not about the movie. I mean about the video.
What am I forgetting?
I don't know. Something important. It feels like we forgot something that's always been in these Halloween videos that needed to be here and isn't.
Well, maybe next time. It could be a treat.
Nah, I'm sure if it was important I would have remembered it.